So let's take the first question from this. I forgot, what do you call these again? Tablets, right? So I'm from Britain, so, you know. So these tablets. So let's just pick the first question that relates to the type of topics that we're going to be discussing. And the first question is... Alright, good. Why is it people like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or other similar people that have contributed so much to civilization and helped so many people go to hell? Is it not fair for them to make the claim that the Muslims are so bad and that they pushed me away from it? Obviously it is Islam they should follow and not people, but the interaction is with people before Islam. Okay, so what I'm getting here basically is the problem of hell. And this is a major problem amongst youth, not because it is a problematic question per se, it's because people don't have the right background to address this question effectively. There are a few points that I want to mention. Firstly, why are we assuming people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are going to go to hell? That's an assumption. Because from the Islamic spiritual tradition point of view, when someone dies, a specific person, we can't say where they're going to go. For various reasons. Because there's almost an infinite number of variables that basically shape people's decisions and what path they're going to follow in their life. We don't know if they were given what you call hujjah. In other words, the dalil burhan, the conclusive evidence, or enough evidence, whether it's spiritual or intellectual is another question, enough evidence for them to accept Islam. They could be one of the 4 categories of people as per the authentic tradition, authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where there are people in between messengers, too old to hear the message, and other categories, and they're going to be tested on the Day of Judgment. Maybe those people are going to be tested on the Day of Judgment. I mean, this question for me is a question that is not a problem because of what it's pointing to. It's a problem because we don't realize who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. If Allah is the most just and the most merciful, why are we worrying about Bill Gates and Fulan and Fulana and Joe Blogs and John Doe? I mean, who really cares? Does it make any difference? Sufyan al-Thawri, one of the famous scholars of Islam, he said, if I had to choose between Allah and my mother to judge me, he would choose Allah. Because he knew who Allah is. He has focused on the aspect of Tawheed, of the oneness of Allah, which is His names and attributes. Allah's names and attributes we affirm, and we don't compare to anything. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. So when Allah is Ar-Rahman, the merciful, Al-Wudud, the loving, Al-Hakim, the wise, the just, etc., then those attributes, names and attributes, are going to manifest themselves. So if someone ends up going to hell, then they deserve it. And that's it. No one's going to be treated unjustly. So don't worry about some American Indian who's basically sharpening his arrows, or some, I don't know, Inuit, or some Aborigine somewhere, or Bill Gates, or Trump, right? It doesn't matter. Do your bit. Islam is supposed to be existential, meaning referring to the self. Allah says very clearly, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Where are you going? Where are you going? Forget about all these people. Allah's justice and His mercy and His love will manifest itself. But where are you going? Where are you taking yourself? So I think it's very important for us to understand. Now, if the question now is not specifically about these people, but about the whole question of hell as a concept, then we have to re-educate ourselves on what Jahannam is. Because many of us were brought up into certain societies or cultures where all we know about Islam is the stick, right? You do something wrong, stick. Some of you call it danda, right? Stick. You get in trouble, you're going to get hit. Allah hates you. Allah's going to throw you to hell. You're going to get punished. He's your enemy. He's your monster, right? Now there are a few things we need to unravel here. Firstly, categorically, you must understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want to send anyone to hell. Khalas. This is well known in the mainstream Orthodox Islam. Allah says in the Quran that He prefers belief for His servants, for human beings. If you look at the exegesis of this ayah, it means that we choose disbelief. We throw ourselves into the hellfire. And when you look at the ayat, the verses concerning hell and heaven and other places, and other similar concepts, you see that Allah has one will, but there are different aspects to His will. there's the kind of existential will, and there's the legislative will. There are two types of wills. One will is the will that what Allah wants, and the other will is what Allah allows, that's in line with His wisdom. So when people are thrown into hell, it's the type of will, they're not what Allah wants, but the aspect of His will that He allows that's in line with the wisdom. Do you understand the difference here? This is well known in Islamic creed. Different aspects to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah doesn't want you to go to hell, but if you're thrown into hell, He's willed it that's in line with the divine wisdom that you may not understand or access. But He doesn't want you to go to hell. So therefore the question is this, not why does a loving Lord send me to hell? But rather the question is, why do I choose hell over a loving Lord? That's the question. Okay? Now another thing underlying an assumption behind this question is, hell is unjust. Well, it's not unjust. I tell you why. No one disagrees with the concept of punishment, right? As a concept, no one disagrees with this. So what the problem here is that you don't think that hell is an adequate punishment, meaning it's too harsh for shirk. Well, the problem here is not what Allah is saying, the problem is us, because we belittled shirk. If Allah is the arbiter, Allah is the reference point, He is Al-Hakim, He has the totality of wisdom and knowledge, then if Allah says someone who dies on shirk, on polytheism, on associating partners with Allah, then they are eligible for hell, then what does that mean? That means, and it should show to us how severe shirk is, not how unjust Allah is. Because Allah is the most just. So we have the problem. We have to really realign our morals and understand that shirk is worse than anything. Even genocide. This is the Islamic spiritual tradition, whether you like it or not. This is not belittling genocide, of course, because a lot of these evil deeds are a manifestation of shirk. Then they are a manifestation of associating partners with God. Because if you're going to do genocide, it's because you probably are worshipping yourself. As Allah says in the Quran, have you not seen the one who takes his desires as his own Lord? So it's far more complex and nuanced than that, but the point I'm trying to say is, I've tried to unravel many of the assumptions behind this question in a short, concise way, but it does require maybe a lecture, but I hope that basically unravels a few things for you. The other assumption is the final one, just unraveling all the assumptions, because a lot of questions have many other questions behind them here. Another assumption is, if you contribute to civilization, then somehow you deserve paradise. Right? That doesn't mean anything. That means that you've got the wrong moral and spiritual filters on, right? You need to change your lenses the way you're seeing reality. You could do a good deed and not do it for the sake of Allah, and you won't get no reward, right? It's not only the deed itself. Remember, Islam is very spiritual. It's not just the outcome, it's the intention, right? Maybe some people, want to contribute to civilization just to serve their ego, not to serve their master and their Lord. Do you see? So you have to sit from an internal and external point of view. Don't assume that just because someone has done so many good things in society actually means that they deserve some form of divine grace. That's not the case. Maybe they were doing it, just to be, I don't know, it's just feeding their ego, which is a form of shirk, isn't it? It's a form of associating partners with Allah. So we need to be more nuanced when it comes to these type of questions. But at the same time, as Muslims, we have to understand that we don't have a condemnatory, if there's such a word, psychological state. He's going to hell. We're not allowed to do that. This is beyond us. We can't arrogate that to ourselves. Okay? We should be like the Prophet ﷺ, who wanted everyone to go to paradise. Right? And the pious predecessors, when they spoke to people, they would speak to them as if their ends will be better than theirs. Meaning they will go to paradise before them. Right? And so we don't make these type of judgments at all. We suspend judgment. If someone dies and a non-Muslim, we give our condolences. We're not allowed to say where they're going. This is not part of our tradition. Allah knows, right? Allah is the most merciful and just. We leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our job is for us to go to paradise, to be as best as possible, and for us to plant the seed in other people's hearts and minds, so inshallah they can taste some of the mercy of Allah in this life and the hereafter. Now adding judgment on this is totally forbidding in our tradition. And that's why it's quite sad that there's a lot of Muslims, especially online, the Tom Dicks and the Abdullahs, they have a very condemnatory attitude. Whoever closes the door to the mercy of Allah while someone's alive, he's a shaitan. Khalas. I don't care who they are. If someone has already closed the door to Allah's mercy in this world, there's no hope, he's going to hell, this guy's going to hell, is a shaitan. Okay? Just know that. Because, it's like, who only a shaitan would want to stop Allah's mercy, right? We have hope for everybody. So, sorry for the waffle, but there was a lot of assumptions behind that question. So let's take one from the floor. Bismillah. Yes?
You know they say that on the Day of Judgment, you'll be asked, somebody will say, oh, I didn't know about Islam, but if you as a person has been with them, they'll be like, oh, why didn't you tell me about it? How do you know when it's enough? How do you know when you will be helping?
That's a good question. Well, one scholar said that the concept of hujjah, which means basically, what's hujjah in English? Yeah, the conclusive evidence in a way. Yeah, you've given them enough for them to become a Muslim. Yeah, they said it's answering the 3 questions in the grave. One scholar said this. So you need to tell them who their Lord is, who their Prophet is, and what their message is. Right. So if you give evidence for those 3 areas, then you've that's enough. Right. But at the same time, I would argue you don't know when it's enough. You don't know. Just keep on doing your bit. And I think that's a better way of looking at it, because it means you'll never give up. And this is the kind of psychological state of the Prophet ﷺ, who was very persistent. Right? Persistence beats resistance, as they say here. He was very persistent in giving dawah, always knocking on the doors, always giving dawah, never giving up hope, even to, at the deathbed of his uncle. Right? So, but at the same time, it shouldn't make you now be in some kind of existential crisis thinking, oh, I'm doomed because I haven't given enough evidence. You should, think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, the hadith Qudsi, I am as my servant thinks I am, which in Arabic also means, I am as my servant expects me to be. So Allah's not a monster, right? So we don't fear Allah like we fear enemies or monsters. And that's another concept we need to readdress. That khawf Allah, the fear of Allah, is not being scared of a monster. Many Muslims are like that. How can you fear someone like that you're supposed to worship? That's not the fear that we're talking about in the Islamic tradition. There's 2 types of fear. The fear that you fear a monster or an enemy. The other fear is the best example I could come up with, or I've heard, is the fear of a child when she's getting told off by her mother, and the child is so upset and he's clinging onto the mother saying, sorry mum, forgive me, I'm so sorry. It's the kind of fear of loss of Allah's mercy, fear of loss of Allah's love, fear of loss of Allah's pleasure. That's the type of fear we're talking about. But if the fear that we have is the fear that gives us a sense of hopelessness and a sense of, he's my enemy, this is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you. Just letting you know, okay? Because some people are brought up like that. So, I hope I answered the question. So don't be in a state of hopelessness. Just do your bit. Keep on learning, be on that path of dawah, plant the seed. And Islam is about planting seeds. You're not going to have a debate and a discussion. These are normal human beings that you need to, have a genuine care for. The Prophet said in a hadith in Bukhari, that's in Tariq al-Kabir, he basically says that love for an-nas, the Arabic is an-nas, and it's sahih, it's an authentic hadith. Love for humanity, what you love for yourself. There are a hadith that says akhihi, which is your Muslim brother. But there's also hadith on an-nas, on humanity in general. So love for an-nas, what you love for yourself. So if you have that attitude and you don't lose hope and you think well of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you keep on learning and you're doing your best and you're planting the seed, inshallah you'll be fine. Oh yes. Well, take one of these. So many youth I speak to are leaving Islam. We are studying in a secular society and the scholars of our community are too busy answering basic questions. All these doubts are leading to us leaving Islam to a place where we know there is a God but don't act upon it. This is a brilliant question. It's an ayah. It's a sign of our times. It's an indicator to what's happening. And this is my, chip on my shoulder. we have thousands of ulama, qualified from institutions who have studied, and we have huge issues, intellectual issues in our community. And fundamentally they're spiritual issues, but the intellectual stuff is used to veil the emotional, spiritual issues. But the point is, we're giving all of these intellectual excuses to people because we're not addressing key fundamental questions. We're getting intellectually abused on campus, right? About God, atheism, skepticism, secularism, neoliberalism, the works. We don't have any adequate responses on a mainstream Islamic point of view. Where are they? Alhamdulillah, there are some really good institutes coming out. Umar Sulaiman, he's got an institute called Yaqeen Institute, phenomenal. I had a meeting with him about 6 weeks ago. You know, great hope in what he's doing. May Allah bless him and preserve the institute and take it further. It's late, right? I think it's 15 years late. Yeah, I mean, you know, but alhamdulillah, he's taken the courage to do this, and may Allah bless him and preserve them. But we don't have anything else really. I mean, I've just finished a book. It's called The Divine Reality, God, Islam and the Mirage of Atheism. It's available to pre-order, but it's going to come out globally in the next month or so. I wrote that book, but that book should have been written 15 years ago by someone far more qualified. And if I wrote it, then and I'm not saying it's not fake humility, it's a sign of our times. You know, we have a khutbah and the imam's talking about how to do wudu, for example. I mean, for the, you know, he's come to the masjid. I'm sure he saw someone do wudu and he's just copying him. Yeah? The Prophet said, pray as you see me pray. You know, it's an emulation action, right? And he's talking about the ins and outs of wudu, which is fine, we need it because it's part of our spirituality. But the students in the front line, they don't care about wudu. They're caring about, I don't believe in Allah anymore. I have this problem of evil. I have, you know, the problem of morality, right? I have the problem of secular culture. I have all these intellectual issues. No one's addressing them for me, right? And then we're talking about wudu. Now, I know that's a crude example, but I think I'm trying to raise a point here that we have serious issues and no one's there to articulate them for people in an effective way. So, it's a sign of the times. And what I would argue is that, you know, we should support institutions that are trying to solve these problems, support the likes of Yaqeen Institute, and other organizations or individuals that are trying to, you know, solve this problem. And, you know, learn, study with mashayikh, and, you know, we can't blame them as well. They have the knowledge, we should go to them, right? We should go to them. They shouldn't impose themselves on us all the time, you know, because they're mashayikh, there's an adab, you know, and we should search for them and ask for them, travel to them, find out who they are, learn basic creed, then we should learn how to contemporize it in a contemporary way, you know, make it contemporary and make it applicable to our issues, you know, because there are ulama around, we just need to study, you know, and there's no excuse. Many of you study for university degrees that you'll never use in your life, frankly. Yeah, most of your degrees are worthless in my view. Yeah, no offense, but it's true. Yeah, the guys study psychology, they end up doing project management. Guys studying philosophy end up doing, you know, being an accountant. The guy's doing this, that, and the other, and this is vocational. Alright, it'll give you transferable skills, of course it will. I'm not trying to downgrade, you know. I'm still studying too, I'm doing another postgrad, yeah, so I'm studying. But the point I'm trying to say here is it's, I'm trying to, you know, mubalagha, I'm being rhetorical here. I'm trying to say to you, you know, Allah's not going to ask you what you go for your degree. That's what I'm trying to say, right? So put a bit of effort on the biggest exam of your life, right? So we need to empower ourselves as well, so we could find these students of knowledge and these scholars, sit with them, learn from them, and then we'll be able to contemporize what we've learned. You know, it's very important. But yeah, it's sad, it's a sign of our times. And that's why we should have these type of Q&As, you know, attend webinars or, you know, come together and just learn, you know. You could do it. It's no rocket science. You can do it. So, or attend really good Al-Kawthar courses called The Mirage of Atheism, you know. I heard that was a really good course. I'm kidding. So I'm trying to say that there are some things there, yeah. So it just takes that kind of feeling empowered to go and try and find the solution. Don't always wait. Sometimes you have to chase knowledge. Knowledge is going to come to you. So, question from the floor. Yes, sir.
So, how would you prove to an atheist that Quran is the word of Allah as a non-Arabic speaker? So, as you would Muslim, what would be your take on that? Because obviously you don't want to go to the science too much for this.
Are you trying to set me up? That's an hour question, bro. So how would you prove to a non-Arab speaker that the Quran is a linguistic miracle?
I mean, you use that as your evidence for Allah, right?
Well, we can, but it's a long topic. I'll give you a summary. Let me give you a summary, right?
Can I just like clarify what you mean by this then? So whenever I give Dawa, I always used to relate Allah from the bottom of the Quran. I would like suddenly like put that in there, right? So I could lead up to like a further conclusion, if you will. So how would you do something? Would you just completely ignore that topic, or would you do?
No, I wouldn't. But I think the most fundamental thing to do when you're talking to people about Islam is to really engage with their fitrah. So, Islamic epistemology is quite unique because it starts with knowledge and ends with knowledge. It doesn't start with doubt and then trying to find knowledge, right? So if you're always going to start with doubt, you never have any conviction. So Islamic epistemology is quite interesting. So we have the concept of the fitrah. The hadith in Sahih Muslim of the Prophet ﷺ, he said every child is born in a state of fitrah, Islam, essentially. And then the child changes their religion or their worldview of faith as a result of social conditioning, parenting, teaching, etc. There's a socialization effect that affects our fitrah. Now, what is the fitrah? The best kind of analogy I could think of the fitrah is as if it's a lens. Imagine this is a lens. And the fitrah contains a form of knowledge. And the knowledge is, I know who Allah is. I mean, He deserves worship. And I know He's a reality, right? So the fitrah is like a lens. If the lens is clean, you'll be able to see the truth, right? But if it's clouded, you can't see the truth. So what unclouds the fitrah? What unclouds the fitrah is Quran, is Sunnah, is spiritual experiences, because there's a verse in the Quran that relates to experiences, like the people on the boat and they have waves of clouds over them and they all of a sudden remember Allah, right? It awakens the fitrah. Then you also have sound aql, a sound intellect, sound rationalizations, unveil or uncloud the fitrah. And then when you do that, then you can see the truth. So what does it mean? It means these rational arguments, and it means that all of these things are not, they're a means, they're not an end. That's the point. They're an end, they're a means to awaken the fitrah. They act as trigger points to awaken the fitrah. So when you're giving dawah, you're not going to be so kind of focused on the intellectual gymnastics of trying to win an argument, but rather you have the position of you know what's going on, you know what the haqq is, and now you're just planting the seed, or you're trying to help clean the fitrah. And sometimes that could be just being a good person, or it could be that you just ask the right questions. Sometimes we have to give people answers all the time. That's ridiculous. Whoever thinks they have to answer all the questions is a fool. Is a fool. Even Allah doesn't answer all the questions, and you think you could answer all the questions? Not that because He's not able, of course He is, but sometimes if you ask the right question, it would lead people naturally to get the right answer. So the point I'm trying to say here is, sometimes we're fixated on argumentation. And we need to basically understand that's not the case. If you understand Islamic epistemology about the fitrah, then we know it's about planting the seed, it's about unclouding the fitrah. But to answer the question, how would you articulate the Quran to a non-Arab? Well, there's a really good essay on Hamza Tzortzis.com, right? And it's called God's Testimony. I suggest you read that. And the summary of that, or what you can do, you could buy the book, The Divine Reality, God is Some of the Mirage of Atheism, and he has a more refined version in that book. But just to summarize, what it does, it basically takes something from epistemology called testimony and argues that it's a valid and fundamental source of knowledge. They say so of others, right? And it takes something called inference to the best explanation, which is a valid, indispensable way of thinking and concluding about things. We use it from medicine to science to everything else. I combine the two and conclude that the Quran must have come from the divine. Why? Because we have testimonials from experts and from the Arabs at the time who are best placed to challenge the Quran, that they failed to challenge the Quran. As Navid Kermani, an academic who wrote in his essay in the Blackwell Companion to the Quran, he says that it's obvious that the Prophet ﷺ was successful against the poets. Otherwise, Islam would not have taken root from that point of view, right? Because there was so much social political challenges. Islam was a social political challenge at the time. And, why would an Arab become a Muslim if it was a fake linguistic miracle? If it could be challenged? Why would people do that? Especially when they're fighting about this, right? So, it's obvious from a social point of view that the Quran laid a smackdown on the Arabs, on Arab. Whose phone is this? Hello? How'd you turn it off, bro? That cut my flow. Where was I? Yeah, the Arabs at the time were the best place at expressing this on the Arabic tongue. The Quran challenged them, and it wasn't any old challenge, because if you could meet that challenge, then the kind of social political pressure from the Quran's worldview would no longer be a pressure, because you would have dismissed it, right? Because it went against the economic structures, the social structures, the moral structures, right? And they were willing to fight for this. All they had to do is produce 3 lines like it, but they failed. So I had all this evidence up and this testimony to show that the Quran is inimitable, and you don't have to know any Arabic. Yes, there's counter testimonies, and I discuss why you can't take them seriously. Then after I talk about inference of the best explanation, say, well, if that's true, then it could have either come from an Arab, a non-Arab, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or God, and I rationally break down why it couldn't have come from an Arab, a non-Arab, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then I conclude therefore it came from God. That's a very crude summary, but it's full of detail and argument, and you see that it's actually really robust, especially when we discuss testimony, because in Western philosophy, in academia, it's growing that a fundamental source of our knowledge is just the say-so of others. And the proof is that none of you could empirically prove to me right now that the world is round. Sphere. You can't. And you're at uni. Actually try and do it. I'll give you $1,000.
What do you mean?
Wait, this is a talk, man. Go on, sister. Yeah, but what's an image, sister? Is image empirical or testimonial? No, it's not for you. Because it's an image. Because how do you know it's earthed? Someone must have told you when you were growing up that that thing there is earth, right? So that's testimonial knowledge. So where's the empirical evidence, guys?
So I was thinking about last time we talked.
Come on, don't be shy. Go on, you were saying, bro?
So remember how last time I was telling you when you're looking at planes, you can see the curve of the horizon? So I traveled from here like Southeast Asia, right? And the whole time there you can see the curve of it. So if you see that curve going the whole way around, you can naturally assume that the rest of it is the same.
Yeah, it's still an inference though. Because it could be still a semicircle.
But Southeast Asia is like almost all the way around.
Yeah, but that you only know that because of testimony. That's the point. You only know Southeast Asia is all the way around because it's testimonial knowledge based on someone pointing on a map. But if you're just using your empirical evidence, you being on a plane, it could just be one big semicircle, bro. The point is, everything is fundamentally testimonial from this point of view. You can't really prove the Earth is round. Let me give you something even more severe. China existing. Everyone knows China exists. If you're a betting person, you would bet all your wealth that China exists. Right? As my daughter says, Baba, everything's made in China. Right? So, the point here is, even something like the truth of China, all you have is testimonial evidence. I mean, give me something empirical. Go on.
Like, if you made a satellite, and then, like, you know it's accurate.
If. Have you done it?
No,
Well, there you go. That's my point. I could say a lot of ifs, bro.
How about if you look at the moon, the sun, they're round, so from a scientific point of view, they're round and they're orbiting each other, they have their properties.
Well, how do you know they're orbiting, bro? Who told you?
Isn't it in the Quran?
Forget, but that Quran is still testimonial. It's Allah's testimony. I'm not trying to say that this thing is wrong. I'm trying to say that the source of your conclusion is not empirical. You're deluded to think it's empirical, but it's fundamentally testimonial. Even China existing. How do you know China exists? Like, really?
Well, like, that train of thought means that you have to go around every country in the world to be like, I know.
No, I'm not saying that you have to only prove things using empirical evidence. I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to show you is that lots of the conclusions that you know to be true are not through the empirical domain, if you like. It's through the testimonial domain. This is well known in philosophy, by the way. It's well known. Even in the scientific method, if you study it properly, the testimony of other scientists is very important. It's like the scientific enterprise. You need other scientists to reaffirm your own results, but you can only believe them if you believe what they said, even if they claim to have done the testing themselves, because you can't test everything. I did this with Professor Lawrence Krauss. I said to him, empirical realities are not the only, empiricism is not the only way to truth. And he was like, I just do the science. And I said, okay, well, do you believe in evolution? Yes, I do. Have you done all the experiments yourself? No, I haven't. Everyone started laughing at him because it goes to show that there's going to be an element that you have to follow your intuition and just believe other people what they say. Now, David Hume, who's a Scottish skeptic 200 or something years ago, he argued about testimony. He said it's very important, but we only accept testimony if it's in line with our collective experiences. So in the 1990s, Professor C.A. Cody, he wrote a book called Testimony, a Philosophical Study, I believe, it was published by Oxford. He said that, well, David Hume's wrong, because what does David Hume mean by our collective experiences? How can you know about our collective experiences? It's through testimony. So he shows that testimony is fundamental. It's not just useful. And another interesting thing is, if Hume, if he was alive, were to respond and say, well, I only believe in testimonial knowledge if it's in line with my experiences, well, then you'd have no knowledge at all. Because if someone, from an empirical point of view, only relies on their own experiences, you won't have this body of knowledge anymore. Anyway, it's very nuanced and you'd have to read more about it. But what I suggest you do is read the book by Professor Cody called Testimony. And it's brilliant. It just goes to show that a lot of what we believe to be true and we think it's scientific or empirical is actually just testimonial. Which is fine. I'm not saying it's wrong. But the whole argument is rests upon the point that testimony is a valid and indispensable source of knowledge. It can be wrong, of course. Just like empirical data could be wrong. But it's valid and fundamental. Yes, sir?
So if one person says China exists and another person says China doesn't exist, then how do you rank the say-so of that person?
Yes, well, that's a good question. That's a question that's being answered by epistemologists. For example, Professor Keith Lehrer, he's an emeritus professor. He basically discusses and says, well, you have to be trustworthy in your assessment on the trustworthiness of others. And it has to be truth-connected. And what truth-connected means for him is like your intuitions, I believe, your background information, and other people's testimonies. So there's these webs of beliefs that we have. Associate Professor Benjamin McMillan, what he says is, well, we could solve this testimonial problem by talking about the right for deferral, which means that the person giving the testimonial knowledge has to accept that they're going to be challenged. And they have to be willing to answer questions. And the audience has to basically take the responsibility of deferring challenges to the speaker. It's very nuanced, but that's a sub-question. That doesn't really affect what we're saying here. What we're saying here is that whether we like it or not, testimony is a fundamental source of knowledge. I remember I had a little bit of a debate with an atheist on Twitter. He was actually a really, really arrogant fool. And he said, oh, you're such an idiot, man, because we have videos. I said, you didn't understand. Video is testimonial. Yeah, after all, it could have been made up, right? You have to believe that's a Chinese shop, and those are Chinese symbols, and that's a Chinese man in China, because someone told you. Because it's assumed that's in China, because they just said it. This documentary has been taken in China. All right? That's a testimonial evidence, right? So a lot of the things that we actually take for granted and believe to be true is based on testimonial knowledge. And I'm not saying it means it's weaker knowledge or we shouldn't believe in it. I'm not saying that. All I'm trying to unravel to you here is it shows it's fundamental and it's in an indispensable source of knowledge. And that's my point. And the reason we should bring this out as Muslims is because it's part of our tradition. You know, the West has us caught up really in a more of a, intellectual discussion on this issue in the past, 40, 50 years? But the Eastern tradition, like the Muslims, we've been talking about testimony for over 1,000 years. Ilm al-Hadith, the sciences of Hadith, the Isnad, the chain of narration, right? The matan, the text itself. This is all part of who we are. How do we preserve Hadith? How do we preserve Quran? All through testimony, right? And now they're playing catch up and understanding actually it's fundamental source of knowledge. I mean, even David Hume, he even says that hypothetically, if in the 1600s there was 8 days of darkness, and different people from different times and places all saw the same thing, and it's transmitted back to us, via mass reporting, and they all came from different channels, different transmissions. He said that we would have to believe it to be true. He said the scientists, the philosophers, etc., would have to believe it to be true. This is in his own works. Because he even appreciated the rational force. His only argument was that we don't have such examples. That was his only argument. Not that, if there was mass reporting about a certain thing, So, anyway, you could do your own reading on this, but the point here is, testimony is fundamental source of knowledge from that point of view. I'll give you a little story. I go around and I speak to apostates a lot in the UK and everywhere else, and there's this one guy, he was basically owning a online gambling service, and he left Islam, and he thought he was an empiricist, a scientist now. And I spent about 4 hours with him, his family were there, and I was gave him everything. I don't have much, I gave him everything. I was getting a bit tired, then he said, you know what, I don't believe in Islam because the Quran says the world is flat. Obviously that's not true, but he just said that. And I got a bit arrogant, which you shouldn't. I said, yeah, you're right, the world is flat. I said, you prove the world is round. Prove to me the world is round. And he was like, what? Go on then, prove it to me, Mr. Scientist, Mr. Dawkins, Mr. New Atheist, Mr. Empiricist. You prove to me the world is round. He was changing colors, green, yellow, blue, pink. He couldn't come up with anything. He was like you guys today. He had no clue. Videos, the science textbook, that's testimonial knowledge. You've been such a hardcore empiricist in our discussion, you can't accept testimony according to your own criteria. So give me your empirical evidence. If you go on a plane, if you do this, if. He had no answer. Do you know what he said at the end? He thought he had it. He was like, the shadows, night and day. And I said to him, indeed, in the alternation of the night and day are signs for those who reflect. Quran. His mouth was on the floor. I'm telling you, I could have fit my head in his mouth. His mouth was on the floor. And I said to him, I'm trying to remember, this was a few years ago, so I'm not entirely accurate, but this is the gist of it. I said to him, you arrogant so-and-so. You were pointing the finger at the Quran, but there were 3 fingers pointing back. And the only answer you got was an answer that can only be found in the Quran from that point of view. The Quran could be a source of people's misguidance and guidance, Anyway, that's one of the stories. I think testimony was quite valid from that discussion anyway. So, next question. Let's take one from here. Okay, if an atheist asks you why you believe, how do you respond? Well, there's 2 ways of responding. Tell him what you believe. Just plant the seed, have a discussion with him. But I want to use this question just to open up another perspective. I truly believe that the right question is not, does God exist? We should turn the tables. The question is, well, what evidence do you have to reject him? Because if we already believe it's fitrah, it's a natural belief, it's within us, then we shouldn't basically always, chase the mirage, right? Just flip the question. Say, well, why do you reject God? Because for me, God is a self-evident truth. Yes, I have evidence for God, but I also believe He's self-evident. Now, He may challenge us, but say to Him, look, if we had dinner and someone said, my friend, I've made a conclusion. I believe the past doesn't exist. Like what happened 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, and 5 decades ago never happened. We were just created right now with all of these memories and learning. Now you're not going to sit there and just lap it up. You'll be like, well, where's your evidence, right? Why? Because he's gone against a self-evident truth. Now not all self-evident truths are going to be true. Sometimes our intuition could be wrong. But as a starting point, if someone rejects a self-evident truth, You're not just going to sit there and lap it up. You're going to say, well, where's your evidence? But what we do, when someone asks a question about God, we lap it up and we think we have to be on the defensive. No, just turn the question around. Well, I think that's the wrong question. What evidence do you have to reject God? You know, because if the underlying concept of God as a creator, you know, a divine causal condition for the universe, a designer, a cause, right? That underlying basic concept is fundamental. It's natural, it's intuitive, it's untaught. You never learn it. You don't learn, you're not growing up as a child and your mom says, you know, if you do this, it moves because you're the cause, that's the effect. You know, we don't have this discussion on metaphysics at home. Well, I hope not, yeah? Right? So the point is, it's untaught, it's learned by introspection. So it's fundamentally, the basic idea is self-evidently true. So if someone wants to challenge it, just ask them. Now they may say, well, I don't like your conception of the divine. That's different, that's theology. But if it's the basic concept of a creator or a cause for the universe, then ask them, well, what good reason do you have to reject that? Turn the tables. And then that would enable you to basically articulate a more stronger position, right? Because if they start giving some evidence, then you could address it quite effectively, right? But anyway, so what I would say is, if someone asks you about your beliefs, just tell them. Just tell them, you know? And just don't focus on intellectualism. Just plant the seed. You know, it's always good to give the conclusion first, then justify it. You know, a lot of books are written that way. If you read the book Made to Stick, it's very good how to write and get your ideas to stick in people's minds. Just conclude first, then break it down. So, you know, say, we believe in Allah. He's the all-merciful Lord that we worship. What does worship mean? To love Allah, to know Allah, to obey Him, and to direct all our acts of worship to Him alone. And we believe the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, is the manifestation of this message, and he taught us how to worship Allah. Boom! Just very simple, right? You know, do you want to know more? Do you want to know why I think this is true? Oh yeah, sure. And then break it down. You know, plant seeds in people's heart. Right? And don't let it be a debate, because when it's a debate, it's ego versus ego, isn't it? And then it's all about being right and looking good. If you're doing it just to look good and being right, then you're not going to get anywhere.
We have an online question.
Yeah.
How can one tell if they are sincere in worshiping Allah or just doing it for the feeling?
I don't know. Let me intuitively respond, not respond formally, yeah? So my intuitions behind this question is, the question is a sign of ikhlas, right? Because if you're content with your ikhlas, then you don't have ikhlas. One of the things that you're always going to be worried about is your intention and whether you think you've done something for the sake of Allah or not. Sufyan al-Thawri was so worried that he used to get like physical ailments as a result of worrying about his intention and his ikhlas. So ikhlas is not a button that you press, it's not a lever that you pull, right? You just have to continue work on it. And what does ikhlas mean? It means doing it because you love Allah for His sake, doing it for His reward, and doing it to prevent yourself from punishment. If you do it for each of those individual things, that's ikhlas. If you do it for all three, it's better. Okay? So, how do you know? Well, would you really know? I don't think you'll ever really know. But there are signs. I think one of the signs are that your private deeds are more than your public deeds. One of the signs is that you do something, well, not one of the signs, but one of the things that allow you to develop this, like as Ibn Taymiyyah said, do something every day, apart from the fara'id, apart from the obligatory acts of worship, for the sake of Allah, and no one else knows. Your mother, even your qareen won't know, yeah? No one knows, right? Just do something every day for the sake of Allah and no one's going to know. Okay? Like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, what did he do? He used to, in the morning, clean the house, I believe, of a blind woman and milk her goats. You know, no one knew this apart from Umar, because he was like spying on him to find out what does he do. And then from that day he said, you know, this man's always going to surpass me in good deeds. And that's when he was Khalifa, imagine. Because he knew his public deeds, the pious predecessors, they never thought that their public deeds were going to be accepted anyway. That's why they were so focused on the private deeds. So, learn to develop ikhlas rather than think about whether you have ikhlas or not. Because that question may never be answered. Just keep on striving and don't let shaitan win. Because you may be like, oh, I'm not going to do the action because I'm not really sure about my ikhlas. No. The ulama say keep on doing the action because you never develop ikhlas until you do an action anyway. That's the irony. So you have to go to the gym, right, to grow some muscles, right? You can't say, oh, I'm not going to go to the gym. You won't grow anything. You won't get fit, right? So throw yourself in the gym. The spiritual gym. Keep on doing the actions and keep on refining your intention. So there are some things and principles that you could put into place to help you develop ikhlas. Firstly, follow a spiritual path. I know that sounds a bit neo-Islamic, but what I mean is be on a path of purification of the heart. Dhikr, according to the Quran and Sunnah. Reading Quran every day. Tadabbur of the Quran. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Do they not reflect upon the Quran or the locks on their hearts? Meaning, the more reflection you do, the more tadabbur you do, the more your heart becomes unlocked to receive His guidance and mercy. That will facilitate ikhlas. Recite Quran. It's a shifa for the believers. It's a healing for the believers. Again, softening your heart, ready for ikhlas. More likely to have ikhlas. Dhikr. Everything has a polish. And the polish of the heart is the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, getting the heart ready. Facilitating that vessel so it's ready for, the ikhlas factor, yeah? So be on that path, right? Tahajjud, dua, make dua. Because no one's going to help you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anyway on this issue. Especially on this issue, right? And also do those private deeds. Remember what will happen if you don't have ikhlas. On the Day of Judgment, you could think that you basically converted 1 billion people, built 5 million masajid, mosques, that you gave billions away in sadaqah, in charity. But if you did it just for your ego, or just for others to say, look, he's such a nice guy, on your mizan, on your balance on the Day of Judgment is nothing, zero, zilch. Do you see? So know the effects of not having ikhlas. And then know the effects of having ikhlas, which is Jannah, divine bliss, pleasure. Do you see my point? These are, having conscious reminders. And also being on a path of trying to belittle the ego, because the ego is a barrier to ikhlas, isn't it? Because I want to do it for me, I want to look good. It's me, right? So, maybe even write a journal, Think about yourself. Why did I do that action today? Like even when it comes to speakers, isn't it? If I get an email, Brother Hamza, I want you to give a talk on Christianity. Oh yeah, man. It's not my topic. Give it to somebody else who's better. And you get that reward anyway. So if it's the reward, if you want Allah's pleasure, then you don't care if you did it or not. Your eyes on the prize, isn't it? And if you do good deeds, don't attribute them to yourself, Mawardi, the famous scholar, he wrote the book Ahkam al-Sultaniyya, and he told his student, publish it after my death. Because he didn't have the kind of, oh look, it was me, I wrote it, yeah? An-Nawawi, the famous An-Nawawi, he told his student to either burn or put into the river lots of his work. We've lost so much, probably amazing gems from An-Nawawi, because he wasn't 100% sure. SubhanAllah. Because they knew Allah is pure and He only accepts purity from that point of view. So many, famous stories. There's one, I think of the pious predecessors. He would get lunch, isn't it? And then he'll go out maybe for his day or work. And he'll be getting lunch all his life until he died. And then when he died, they realized he never used to eat lunch. He used to fast every day. And he used to give his lunch to some poor people. He didn't even tell his wife. One, I think it was either Sahabi or Tabi'i or one of the pious predecessors, he used to pray tahajjud all the time. And if anyone came into the room, he would go back to bed, pretend to sleep. So they didn't see him praying. And because this was all part of developing ikhlas, developing a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very important, And it's a struggle. This is, one of the shuyukh in England, he made a beautiful point. He said, as a Muslim, you'll be happy and tranquil, but there'll be one thing that you won't be completely happy about. And that's, if you did something truly for the sake of Allah or not. And the one who thinks he's done the deed for the sake of Allah, then be doubtful. If you think, yeah man, I did it. I mean, this is an internal exercise, isn't it? So there are some things that you can do to help you, but I don't think you'd ever deliver ikhlas if you're not on the kind of classical, traditional, spiritual path of dhikr according to the Quran and Sunnah, reciting the Quran, tadabbur of Quran, salah, tahajjud, fasting when you can, all of these things. Because those are things that soften the heart and make it susceptible to having the right intentions and doing things not for your ego, but for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah make us all people of ikhlas. And by the way, don't be under any illusion that what I've just said is what I do. I'm not a hypocrite, yeah? I'm aspiring to do these things. Okay? We're all in it together. We're a spiritual team, okay? So don't think, I'm speaking down at you thinking, yes, I was up for 3 hours last night doing tahajjud. That's not the case at all. So don't think, this is what we all need to do. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people of ikhlas. Because if you don't have ikhlas, wallahi, there's one thing that I try and do though. In sajda, in your prostration, when you're closest to Allah, according to the hadith, ask Allah for sincerity. Do that all the time. Do it all the time. That's the basis for all of your ibadah. So go straight to the root. Don't say, some people say, Ya Allah, let me wake up for tahajjud. You could be doing it just because of the feeling, then you're not worshipping Allah anymore, you're just worshipping the feeling. Right? As Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah said that, don't do worship just for the feeling, do it because Allah deserves worship, and the feeling will come. So, ask for ikhlas. Because it could just be one thing. The famous hadith of what's the Arabic word for card? Bitaqa, right? The famous hadith of the bitaqa, right? Where a man comes on the Day of Judgment and he's got all these, almost an infinite number of evil deeds. And then he's got no good deeds. And then the angels realize there's a bitaqa, there's a card of a good deed on the floor. They pick it up and they put it on the scale and it outweighs all the almost infinite number of evil deeds. What is that deed? La ilaha illallah. It's the kalimatul ikhlas. They call it the kalima, the kind of he had ikhlas in believing in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now some ulama say, and he goes straight to paradise. But there are other Muslims who have ikhlas in the kalima, but they don't go straight to paradise. So the ulama said he had pure ikhlas in this. It was the summit, the epitome of the purity of his ikhlas, of his sincerity. So it could just be one thing. I'm telling you. You could be known to debate atheists all your life and write books and do all this rubbish, but the only thing that got you to paradise is because you decided to massage your mum's feet just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why don't belittle any action that you do. Anything that you do, don't do that, because that little action could be bigger than anything you've done in your life because your heart was solely focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we have to realize is it is about where your heart lies, right? The famous hadith of the man who killed 99 men. People think this is a lesson of forgiveness. It has almost nothing to do with forgiveness if you study the hadith. Right? No, it is, bro. It's about forgiveness. Who are you? Okay, fine. I'll tell you, right? Basically, according to the Shaykh, when we studied this hadith, he killed 99 men. He went to another person and he said, am I going to be forgiven? He said, no. So he killed him as well. Then he's on his travels, he finds someone else and says, am I going to be forgiven? He says, if you go to this town and ask, you will find out. So he travels halfway, then he passes away. Allah says to the angels, to measure, it's over half. So Allah showers him with His mercy and he goes to paradise. The man never asked for forgiveness in the hadith. He never asked for forgiveness. But he wanted to find out. His heart was facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was inclining towards Allah. So the ulama derive is always watch where your heart is inclining. Yeah? So always keep a watch and see what's happening. And if you see it basically moving away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then find out how to bring it back. Sometimes, just playing Quran sometimes could do the job, or just singing and doing tadabbur, or having brothers around you, I travel a lot, and sometimes you're alone in a hotel room, and the shaitan gets you. put the TV on, or let me just watch some rubbish on YouTube. Yeah. I was telling the brothers this recently, I said, that's why if you have brothers around you, people around you, just pick up the phone and call a brother. Right? Or something. Just find ways of, putting yourself in check. If your heart is going that way, bring it back and find out what brings it back. Yeah. Always be on top of yourself. Anyway, sorry, we went long on that one, so. Right, so. I can't read this. Did I have an advantage being born in a Muslim family? It seems that all of the Muslims I know were born in Muslim families. Yeah, that's true. But I don't see how that's a problem. I know where this is coming from. It's like, oh, if you're born in a Muslim family, you're more likely to be Muslim. If you're born in a Christian family, you're more likely to be Christian. But to be honest, that's neither here or there. Because you're assuming the knowledge, the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is al-Hakim. He has the picture. You just have a pixel, if you have a pixel, right? And you're assuming that, if people are born in a Muslim family, they're going to be Muslim. Maybe. There might be a correlation. Who knows? But that's almost irrelevant. Because now you're thinking that the people who are not born in Muslim families, they won't have the chance to become Muslim. That's an assumption. Or you have another assumption is, it's unfair. They were born in a non-Muslim family and they're going to go hell. That's not true. We already discussed this earlier. Allah is the just and He's the all-merciful. His justice and mercy will manifest itself. So don't worry about those people. Worry about yourself. Because it could be that, 2 billion Christians go to paradise. Because they could have been the people in between messengers, or too old to hear the message, or whatever the case may be according to the hadith. And they get tested on the day of judgment, and they're shown to be submitters to Allah, and they go paradise. It could be, right? This is irrelevant. This is Allah's job. These kind of questions? It's like you're trying to play Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the irony. And these questions are spiritual issues, I think, fundamentally. Yes, it's good to question. But if we truly know who Allah is, then really you would never have questions like this. Is Allah all just? Yes. Is He all merciful? Yes. Would these things manifest themselves? Yes. Is He Is He more just than you? Yes. Is He more loving than you? Yes. Is He more merciful than you? Yes. Don't worry. Don't worry. So if someone's born in another family and you think there's going to be a positive correlation that they're more likely to die not in a state of Islam, still don't worry. Because the test will manifest it. They'll be tested in this life or in the akhirah. And Allah knows the kind of variables that were in place and the causes and the causes and the effects that affected them. Allah knows what was in place, so don't worry about that. Allah's justice and mercy will manifest itself, okay? Always link it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Question from the floor, yes.
So for those of us that are not born in, our family is not Muslim, and then we are the only ones out of the group, you're kind of seen as the outsider.
Yes.
And trying to give Dawa to, or trying to tell them why you're in this religion that they think is full of fear and oppression, all of the things that you hear on TV. I guess what I can't fathom is they feel like atheism or agnosticism is a better option, and they use science to kind of back up why their reasoning is that. But if science is based on observations and probabilities of things happening, even if there's 1,000 religions and you choose one of those religions, even if it's the easiest religion, you don't have to pray 5 times. You choose just something like a religion. All you have to do is wear a little pin or something, and then you're that religion. Why would they choose not to even take that 0.1% chance that could be the right religion versus choosing a 0% chance and saying that there is no God, or that there is a God but I'm not smart enough to know who He is, or they pick and choose, they think yoga and meditation is the thing right now, and then they switch it to something else later, or they travel and they think I'll take this from monks and I'll take this from Christianity, and it's just very complicated to kind of give Dawa to people who are very confused, and it kind of confuses me as to how to address them or.
Yes, absolutely. I think with someone's in that kind of state of confusion, just give them simplicity. Because Islam is fundamentally very, very simple. Is that we are here to worship God. Who is God? Right? And then if you talk about that God is the sole creator, sustainer, maintainer of the universe, that He has names and attributes that we affirm, and that they are transcendent and not like anything else. So He's the loving, right? He's got a boundless love, a transcendent love. We may love, but we don't love like Allah. So we don't deify ourselves, and we don't humanize Allah's names and attributes, right? Then we say that Allah deserves all worship. What does worship mean? To know Him, to love Him, to obey Him, and to direct the acts of worship to Him alone. That's it. That's Islam. Allah is one and He's unique. He's not a he or a she. He's genderless. He has no partners. You don't associate partners with Him. And He's unique. Laysa kamithlihi shay. There's nothing like unto Him. Right? There's no plural to His name, Allah. There's no gender. There's no plural to that name. And just plant that seed. I'm a true believer. If you start with that simplicity, you just break it down every time there's a question. You know, and if they talk about evidence, and if they think science is like the new thing, science is beautiful. No one disagrees with science. But let's learn what science really is, because sometimes, wallahi, when you teach people what science is, they have no clue. If you study the philosophy of science, you see, I just did it last year for my postgrad, and it opened so much for me, and you just realize it's not supposed to lead to truth. Yes, it works, but just because it works doesn't mean it's true. It's just workable models of our perceptions. That's it. Right? There's no absolutes in science. That's the beauty of science. So, don't use it as a stick to now bash intuitive and rational proofs that you know to be absolutely true, right? Like a creator or, and stuff like that. It cannot be. That's why Hugh Gulch, who's a philosopher of science and a scientist, he wrote the book Scientific Method in Brief and Scientific Method in Practice, published by Cambridge University Press. He says to insist that science leads to atheism is to get high marks for enthusiasm and low marks for logic. Because it's not true. Science is a useful, amazing tool that basically helps us navigate the physical world and understand it. And it's simple as that. Sometimes it's going to be right. Sometimes it's going to be wrong. Sometimes you think it's going to be right. Then eventually you might say, I'm taking a U-turn, it's going to be wrong. Sometimes it works, but just because it works, it might not be true. For example, every theory has assumptions. Even the most scientifically backed and confirmed theories, and theories that have predictions, like the Darwinian evolution. I forgot that's one of the best things that they have at the moment. But there's a whole lot of assumptions behind that too. They just have to study this, and they don't. And what I'm very fearful about is there's a huge disconnect between academia and popular culture. And sometimes we have to bridge the gap. When you sometimes speak to laymen on the street, they're like, "Oh, science is true, man, because it works. Look at your iPhone." There's an assumption there, just because something works, it means it's true. And that's not true at all. It doesn't follow logically that just because something is working, it means it's true. For example, in the 1700s, they had this thing called phlogiston. And phlogiston was a theory that if in combustible objects, they would release phlogisticated air if burned. It was a workable theory at the time. It was workable to the point that Dan Rutherford in 1772, he used that workable theory to discover a truth called nitrogen. But then they later found out that phlogiston was a load of rubbish. So what that shows us is that you could have a truth come from a workable theory that's actually based on a falsehood. And some people say, "Oh, but that wasn't a complete theory, there was loads of assumptions." Well, that's false, because every theory has assumptions. Every theory has assumptions. And it has their own unique challenges. For example, even one of the best theories out there, which is Darwinian evolution according to scientists, they have a load of assumptions. Now it's getting challenged by things like epigenetics and horizontal gene transfer and niche reconstruction. You have trees that they change their environment, not the other way around. Would you believe it? I think it's a book published by Princeton at the moment. It's called Niche Reconstruction or something. It's just phenomenal. There's a tree that has its competitor, survival of the fittest, right? What does it do? It's not affected by its environment. What it does, it changes its environment. It creates this oil that sets fire, and it burns the other tree or something, or poisons it. It's phenomenal. Look, the more knowledge we have of the physical world, the more it should humble us, and we should say, we actually don't really know, right? And that's how we should be. So science can't be used as a tool of certainty to bash religious discourse. I'm sorry, you can't do that. Because if, for example, from a Muslim point of view, we have a religious discourse of there's a creator, we don't need to refer to science for this. We have metaphysical arguments, we have rational arguments, right? That are not contingent, dependent on the empirical world. It's based on solid deductive facts, right? So if we have all that, why would you want to change that just because of this kind of speculative scientific idea that's bound to change? It's the shifting sands of science. And that's the beauty of science, you know? Could have a U-turn. You don't know. Even Dawkins said this. In 10 years, maybe we won't have Darwinian evolution anymore. Maybe we call it something else. Who knows? And that's the beauty of science. And we should respect it and love it. And as Muslims, we shouldn't reject it. We should accept it. But it doesn't mean you have to accept every conclusion into your creed. Just accept it practically. It's the best that we have. It's the pixel that the humans have. I know Allah has the picture. We just got a small pixel and we're working with it. But what happens in popular discourse is that our pixel is the picture. That's the problem. And it's hard to unravel that because it's a social exercise, isn't it? And you have to sit with people and discuss, okay, what's the philosophy of science? What actually is science? Talk about, just because something works doesn't mean it's true. Talk about how scientists form conclusions, because the conclusions they form are never definite. Because it's based usually on induction. What's induction? You have limited data and you conclude for an unknown. For example, I've observed 1,000 white sheep, therefore the next sheep is going to be white. But that's not necessarily true. You might have the black sheep, right? It's probabilistic, right? Yes, some are really, really confirmed, but a lot of confirmed theories are still based on assumptions, and you still can have a future observation that can deny previous conclusions. This is well known in science. In this university, the University of Calgary, I challenge every single one of you, go to your scientists, academics, go to the philosophy department and the philosophers of science and say to them, does science lead to absolutes? No, it doesn't. Can well-confirmed theories change? Yes, they can. Do well-confirmed theories have assumptions? Yes, they do. Does science lead to certainty? No, it doesn't. Right? Do you see my point? And then you start to then say, you know what? Let's humble ourselves. Let's take the humility pill. And, that's why you can't really use scientific discourse to bash religious truths or even philosophical truths that you've acquired via thinking, especially if you use a method that is far more certain, like the deductive method, right? If you look at the argument from contingency for God's existence, no matter what science you throw at it, it's a very solid argument that things are still contingent, right? That they're not necessary. They're not necessary. They could have not existed. Their fundamental building blocks could have been arranged in a different way. That they have physical limitations like size, volume, shape. What gave rise to those limitations? There must have been an external set of factors that gave rise to those. So you conclude that there must have been an independent and eternal thing that is responsible for all contingent things, dependent things in the universe, right? Now if you throw the multiverse at it, you throw any scientific thing at it, they're still going to be contingent because they could be observed. They have certain physical limitations. What gave rise to those limitations? Why is it this size or not that size? Why is it this color or not that color? Why is it this shape or not that shape? And that applies to big objects like giraffes and refrigerators, and even smaller things like quarks, or atoms, or electrons, or quantum waves, right? It applies to all those things too, so those things are contingent. Now, obviously it's a bigger argument, and it's a quick summary, but what I'm trying to say to you is, we just need to learn these things, So that's why if you really buy the book, The Divine Reality. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
So I was wondering, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all humans, obviously, and before He even created them, He knew that some of them would go to hell, some of them would go to heaven. There would be non-believers, there would be Muslims. What I'm wondering is, what's the point of creating humans who would then go to become misbelievers and bother everyone else and eventually, suffer eternally? So what's the point of creating non-believers?
Well, there is a point, you just don't know the point. In Islamic theology, we believe Allah is Al-Hakim, He is the wise, and everything happens for His good, wise purpose. So there's obviously many areas of life and existence, or even just reality, that you don't have you don't have access to the wisdom behind those things. Big deal. How does that affect your action though? It doesn't. How does it affect the truth of Islam? It doesn't. Right? And even if you were talking about foreknowledge, if I knew my son's going to wake up and have, oatmeal, me knowing he's going to have oatmeal doesn't make him have oatmeal. So if through Allah's knowledge, He decreed something, and He knows something, does Allah make you do it? No. It's like, I know my son's going to have oatmeal, for example, hypothetically. Doesn't make him have oatmeal. I know you're going to fail your exams, bro. No, not really, obviously, yeah? May Allah bless you, pass your exams, pass the big exam on the Day of Judgment as well, okay? So, say I know you're going to fail your exams because I've taught you and I taught you rubbish, right? And all lies. Deliberately. I know you're going to fail your exam. Does it make you fail your exam? No. You still have a level of your own responsibility. So, from that point of view, foreknowledge doesn't imply, making you do the action. So you can argue if Allah's decree is via His knowledge. But even if you can't, I really believe you can't answer these questions anyway philosophically or even rationally. It's just that because it's to do with the realm of Allah's wisdom, then you just suspend your judgment. And you may think, oh, that's a cop-out, bro. No, it's not. We do this all the time. Atheists, theists, skeptics, we do this all the time. When you're on a plane, pilot says there's turbulence, you buckle up. Khalas. Why? You obey him. Why? Do you know the science behind turbulence? Many of us don't. Do you know how plane works? Many of us don't. I don't, for example. But I obey him. Why? He's an authority on this matter. When I go to the doctor, give my symptoms, she says you got cancer, I'm not going to say, you fool, I had the common cold. Right? See, I obey her because I believe she's an authority in this matter. When I go to a financial advisor, I don't say to him, what are you talking about? Yeah? You don't know nothing. Again, imagine me walking into, a medical class, right? And there's a professor talking about some new type of disease, yeah? And I'm like, you have no idea. This happens because of ghosts. Everyone's going to laugh at me. I'm not authority, he's the authority. So it's all big. So even Dr. Elizabeth Fricker, she's a epistemologist, she argues, given my limitations as parametric, I have to basically, gain the knowledge from other people based on trust and testimony because I know that the authority, I'm not the authority, right? You see my point? So they can't say it's a cop-out because it's not. Because we, in so many spheres of our life, practical, non-practical, academic and non-academic, we actually understand that some people have greater wisdom than us in certain areas, and we submit to that wisdom and we say, I don't know what the wisdom is, but I'm going to agree with you because you're the authority in this matter. Now in this sphere, Allah is the authority, so do you see my point? So I hope that clarifies. I think what this Q&A has unraveled, brothers and sisters, this to be very serious here, yeah? And for people watching or whatever, right? You really have to understand that, we have a limited amount of time and I can't answer these questions as thoroughly as I want. Okay? So don't be under any illusion that this answer is, boom, I have the answer now. Yeah? No. These are the seeds for you to plant in your heart and mind so you can do your own study. After your studies, you may say that I was wrong. No problem. But the point here is it unravels a serious issue, maybe on your campus, which is you need to basically have avenues where you could address some of these questions in a lengthier time. Do you see? With people that are qualified, ulama, mashayikh, whatever the case may be. This is a serious matter. You can't accidentally wait for some guy coming from the UK to teach a certain course. Oh bro, can you come on Tuesday? We have a Q&A. And you have all these questions. That shouldn't be happening. You need to have a vision for your Islamic society. You have to have a vision for your fellow students, right? Some of you sit together and you do revision classes, right? But this is the deen. It's supposed to be more important. So come together and actually take each aspect of these questions and spend an hour on it with yourselves or with a sheikh or with someone that knows. Do you see my point? It's very important because they're critical questions. That is the basis for our tradition. And I don't want you to be under the illusion that I'm here for a few minutes to give you some quick answers and I try to fit everything in very quickly and unravel all these assumptions very quickly, but then behind the assumptions are more assumptions and I need to unravel those and maybe give you a little bit more detail, and sometimes I can do it, sometimes I can't because we have limited time. So I don't want you to be under any illusion that, you can get this recording and think, that's it, I've got Usuluddin sorted. It's not the case at all. This is only for you to be excited intellectually and spiritually enough for you to go further, to help you progress and traverse the path of, coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So please, because we have to end now, The point I'm trying to say now is, whoever runs your groups or whatever, focus. Have a strategy for the year. Please. Okay? We have strategy for the dunya all the time, right? We exactly know who we're going to marry. We exactly know what degree we want. We exactly know what job we want to get. We even know sometimes what kind of cake we're going to have in our wedding, for God's sake, right? Yeah? And what you're going to wear. You probably got your shoes now in your wardrobe. And you haven't met her yet, or him, right? So we've got all of these things we've strategized and planned. But this is so far more fundamental. Have a strategy and a plan for these things, so you could really start developing yourselves further. And there's a lot of things online that you could learn from as well, by the way. So may Allah make it easy for you guys. I hope this has planted a seed for you to investigate further, correct me, make it better, learn more, and help you along with your spiritual and intellectual convictions. So really good seeing you guys. Let's make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Trump doesn't win. And it's so funny, we're in Canada and I'm from the UK and we're talking about American politics, how it affects us, huh? It's just crazy. But to be honest, I don't think it will make a difference. That's just my spin on things. I think it would be more exciting if Trump comes into. It would be so much fun, don't you think? At least we could bring back political satire. Political satire has been dead for a while, no? We'll have it back on our television screens. Political satire, it would be brilliant, Come on, look how much fun we had with Bush. It was just fun, right? People were just taking the mick out of him all the time. So maybe you could do that with Trump. Anyway, whatever happens, happens. But may Allah bless you guys. You focus on your spiritual destinies. That's the most important. And stay united. Stay friendly. Stay loving. The Prophet said that you won't enter paradise until you believe, and you won't believe until you love one another. So keep that going. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.